好，唔該晒。
Thank you. Welcome to the end of year press conference jointly held by the FC and its two subcommittees. I'll now give the floor to the chair of the FC, Mr. Ronick Chen. Friends from the media, good afternoon. Welcome to the briefing session jointly held by the FC and its two subcommittees. I will first report on the work of the Finance Committee. After that, the chairs of the two subcommittees will report on the work of their respective subcommittees. During this legislative session, the FC operated smoothly. Members worked in a dedicated and meticulous manner. They pragmatically scrutinized government's funding proposals, serving the gatekeeping role effectively. As of October 3rd this year, which was the FC's final meeting of this session, 67 items have been approved by the FC, involving a total commitment of about $126.8 billion. All items submitted by the government have been scrutinized. They include 20 staffing proposals and 28 public works funding proposals. And 19 non-public works funding proposals involving a commitment of about $18.6 billion. They include the INT Industry-Oriented Fund, which includes $10 billion, and the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme, which includes 3 billion Hong Kong dollars. During this session, the FC held 35 meetings. The total duration is 71 hours and 41 minutes. For funding items that required discussion, the average deliberation time for each item was about 1 hour and 29 minutes. Some items were of greater public concern, such as the loan arrangements for the development plan of the CUHK Medical Center and the funding proposal for the INT Industry-Oriented Fund. The FC had a longer discussion on these two items. The time spent was 3 hours and 2 hours respectively. I wish to reiterate that we should not simply look at the number of hours spent on scrutinizing the funding proposals to gauge the work of the Legislative Council. Instead, we should take into account the entire funding application process, including the consultation done with the relevant panels. In April this year, the FC held a special FC meetings which involved 21 sessions. We spent a total of 34 hours on examining the 2025-26 estimates of expenditure. 88 members submitted about 3,900 written questions on the estimates of expenditure. During the special FC meetings, members requested officials to provide further information on the expenditure items and offered views on various measures in the budget that concern public expenditure. Members noted that in responding to the written questions, many policy bureaus indicated they did not maintain relevant data or information. Some of the replies were too general. I hope the government would take on board members' suggestions by strengthening its data collection and analysis. This will not only help the government respond to members' questions, but also enable it to, based on objective data and scientific method, formulate effective policies and measures with greater precision. The government submitted 48 staffing and public works proposals to the FC. The FC had a further discussion on 4 of these proposals, 3 of which were recommended for further discussion by the subcommittees. One proposal was not recommended for further discussion by the subcommittee, but a joint request for discussion by FC members was approved by the committee. The proposal concerns the reprovisioning of the Victoria Public Mortuary. During the meeting, several members raised questions on the different aspects of the project, including the design, space utilization, and project costs. For example, members asked whether using the underground cavern would lead to an increase of project costs and how the spaces above the ground level and at the cavern should be used to achieve greater cost effectiveness. This helps deliver an important message, which is often stressed by members. That is, the administration should consider cost control at the early site selection phase. It should consider the impact of different locations on project costs and provide data of different possible options in the discussion paper. This would allow members to assess the funding proposal from different perspectives. With the current fiscal deficit, limited financial resources are available. On one hand, members have to address the pressing needs of the public, and on the other hand, they have to ensure that the government can save and spend where necessary so that the government can truly pursue economic growth, advance development, and improve people's lives. Increasing revenue and cutting costs are equally important. We shouldn't be fixated on the scale of the deficit and blindly call for reducing expenditure. What's important is that we're going through an economic transition. We're discovering new growth points. We're leveraging existing resources to drive economic growth. As the saying goes, opportunities lie in challenges. The government should review its financial management approach, optimize its allocation of resources, and inject momentum into our economy. The current term government is bold to break new ground. It strives to increase revenue and lower expenditure through fiscal consolidation. For example, the government applied to the FC to bring back to its own account 6 seed capital funds, which will see in the coming 5 years a large unspent balance of about $62 billion. The government is also reviewing its financial commitment for various programs. For example, it has reduced the financial commitment for the purchase of premises for provision of welfare services scheme. These efforts help unlock public financial resources, enabling the government to more flexibly and effectively make use of public resources. Members agreed this is the right direction. They urged the government to promptly review the modes of operation of the other seed funds and make transparent the revenue and expenditure details to allow members and the public to better understand the operation of the funds. The LegCo supports the SAR government in promoting INT development. Local scientific researches have begun to yield economic outcomes. Hong Kong ranked 3rd in technology of the World Digital Competitiveness Ranking. Among the Global Innovation Index 2025 Top 100 Innovation Clusters, the Shenzhen-Hong Kong-Guangzhou cluster ranks 1st globally. To seize the momentum and opportunities brought by the advancement of innovation and technology and to improve the strategic layout of INT infrastructure, the FC doubled down on this effort this fiscal year and approved a number of funding proposals related to scientific research, which involve over $14 billion. They include the INT Industry Oriented Fund, which is a $10 billion fund, the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme, which is a $3 billion scheme, and the establishment of the Hong Kong AI Research and Development Institute, which involves $1 billion. For the INT Industry-Oriented Fund, the government will participate as a limited partner to channel market capital to emerging and future industries of strategic importance. The fund marks the government's revamped approach in INT industries investment and its effort to dovetail with the national strategy of developing patient capital. This will drive efficient collaboration among the government, industry, academic, research, and investment sectors. This project involves over $10 billion. Members were very prudent when scrutinizing the funding proposal. They asked questions about capital return rates, administrative fees, oversight mechanism, and exit strategies. I hope the government will consider members' opinions and suggestions when implementing the plan, make the best use of its resources, and ensure the fund achieves its expected returns. During this legislative session, various departments strive to promote the development of a smart city, and they have submitted a number of funding proposals to the FC for optimizing IT infrastructure involving over $4.4 billion. They include the development of the police's next-generation communication system, which involves $2 billion, upgrading the computer system at Huanggang Port, which involves about $950 million, and replacing or upgrading traffic control and surveillance systems on strategic roads, which involve $570 million. I'll now invite the 2 subcommittee chairs to report to the Council. First, Mr. Frankie Yek, Chair of the Establishment Subcommittee, will speak.
Friends of the media, I am pleased to report today on the work of the Establishment Subcommittee for the 2025 session. During this session, the subcommittee reviewed and approved 18 staffing proposals, all of which have been approved by the Finance Committee. These proposals cover various livelihood initiatives and policies related to land supply, talent attraction, critical infrastructure protection, and strengthening Hong Kong's position as an international financial center. They collectively support our economic growth and development efforts. Director positions involved are 1. The creation of 1 permanent post in the Office of the Commissioner of Critical Infrastructure Computer System Security to ensure the security of the computer system and network of critical infrastructures and formulate relevant code of practice. Second, the deletion of 2 permanent posts, namely the 2 Assistant Commissioner of Banking in the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. The creation of 4 time-limited posts, including a time-limited post in the Civil Engineering and Development Department, overseeing the works of the South Development and Sustainable Land Tile Office, 2 time-limited posts in the Office of the Commissioner of Critical Infrastructure Computer System security that carry out work relating to the protection of critical infrastructure, as well as 1 time-limited post at the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department overseeing the work related to private columbarium and the planning of municipal infrastructure projects. Fourth, the retention of 18 time-limited posts, such as the 2 time-limited posts at the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau responsible for promoting the company registration regime, accounting profession, as well as fintech. And 3 time-limited posts in the Labor and Welfare Bureau to lead and effectively take forward the work related to talent attraction and support, manpower planning and research, etc. And fifth, the conversion of 1 permanent non-civil service director position to permanent civil service post in the Education Bureau to lead various new initiatives with a view to strengthening the high-quality development of education in Hong Kong and contributing to the country's goal of developing China into a leading country in education. During this session, the subcommittee convened a total of 10 meetings lasting approximately 18.3 hours. On average, each item was deliberated for about 1 hour. All items were first discussed by the relevant panel to address policy matters before being referred to the subcommittee. Following the approval by the subcommittee, the proposals were then submitted to the Finance Committee. The entire discussion process were conducted with considerable diligence and depth. I've observed that when discussing staffing proposals, members posed precise and targeted questions. They focus on the rationale of creating and retaining positions, the nature of the roles, the respective grades, the duration of the positions, division of duties, and key performance indicators, details that are of great public concern. When scrutinizing proposals to create new positions, members thoroughly examined whether such positions were necessary and whether internal redeployment could serve as an alternative to hiring additional staff. This ensured the governments adhere to the principles of prudent financial management, efficient use of fiscal resources, and zero growth in the civil service establishment. The administration also provided specific responses to members' inquiries. Members commended certain departments for their proactive approach of, say, vacating time-limited positions that are not to be retained ahead of schedule to help government save money. They also praised some departments for exercising restraint when necessary, postponing the creation of certain positions and instead filling vacancies through internal redeployment. This year marks the final session of the current Legislative Council. Looking back over the 4-year term of the 7th LegCo, the Establishment Subcommittee reviewed and approved 62 staffing proposals, all of which were then subsequently approved by the Finance Committee. I hope that the Establishment Subcommittee of the next LegCo will continue to adopt a professional, rigorous, and efficient approach in examining the staffing proposals submitted by the government, ensuring equitable resource allocation and maximizing their effectiveness. Human resources serve as a vital driving force for social progress and economic development and are also a key factor in achieving Hong Kong's long-term development and enhancing its competitiveness. The committee must proactively address challenges posed by future societal changes innovatively and optimize the public service to lay a solid foundation for Hong Kong's sustainable development, provide people with high quality and more efficient public services, and ensure the effective implementation of government policies. Finally, I'd like to extend my special thanks to Deputy Chairman Mr. Stanley Tang. Throughout the past year, we've worked side by side, supporting one another in advancing the work of the subcommittee together. Much has been achieved thanks to his dedication and assistance. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yik. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Tony Chen, Chairman of the PWSC, to speak. Friends of the media, I'm glad to be here today sharing with you the works of the Public Works Subcommittee, PWSC, in the 2025 session. Now, let me first talk about some figures. During this session, the PWSC held a total of 17 meetings, lasting more than 36 hours, which include 7 additional meetings totaling approximately 16 hours at the government's request. The subcommittee reviewed 28 funding proposals for public works projects, with a total allocation amounting to $108.2 billion. All of the proposals been approved by the Finance Committee. Among these 28 public works project proposals, $31.1 billion 30% of the funding allocation are spent on infrastructure of the Northern Metropolis, including site formation and infrastructure works for Yuen Long South New Development Area, involving $13.8 billion, Hong Shui Kiu Effluent Polishing Plant, Ngao Tam May Water Treatment Works Extension, as well as improvement of water supply to Northern New Territories. They cost $6.7, $9.6, and $1 billion respectively. This demonstrates the electrical full collaboration with the administration in jointly accelerating the development of the Northern Metropolis. Approximately 28% of the public works funding allocation is related to environmental policies, amounting to about $30.5 billion. The average deliberation time for each funding proposal was approximately 1 hour and 19 minutes. Proposals attracting greater public attention, such as livelihood projects involving over 10,000 mighty works, the $41.6 billion provision for Capital Works Reserve Fund block allocations 2025-26, and the $1.2 billion repositioning of Victoria Public Mortuary. We spent over 2 hours on this proposal. The subcommittee rigorously safeguard public interest by monitoring government's expenditure on public works projects. Members observed that the government has strived to reduce project costs. Take the relocation of Shatin sewage treatment works to caverns as an example. When the panel on development was consulted on it in July last year, the project budget exceeded $15.6 billion. When the proposal was submitted to the subcommittee for review in June this year, the estimate was approximately $12.93 billion, representing a reduction of about $2.7 billion. The Drainage Services Department adopted a direct procurement approach for the electrical and mechanical engineering contract, whereby the government directly procured suitable large-scale electrical and mechanical equipment. Compared to the traditional labor and materials inclusive approach, the direct procurement model helped save on contractor supply chain management cost and risk premiums. Members noted that currently, each public works project set aside contingency fund equivalent to 10% of the estimated project cost. They expressed concern about the one-size-fits-all approach and questioned whether it unnecessarily ties up government financial resources. Members therefore urged the administration to explore the possibility of setting different level of contingency funds based on the scale and nature of individual projects. Members also noted that the government currently pays the Housing Authority an indirect cost equivalent to 12.5% of the project cost for undertaking public works projects. Members suggested that the government review whether there is any room to reduce these indirect costs, thereby lowering the project budget. In response to members' views and concerns, the Development Bureau and the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau are reviewing the current mechanism for public works projects. This includes identifying areas for improvement in the allocation of contingency and examining the percentage of indirect costs paid to various organizations such as MTR Corporation, the Hospital Authority, and the Housing Authority. I expect the administration to share their findings with the Council in the very near future. Different committees of the Legislative Council play a distinct role in public finance and funding approval. After projects are discussed by the relevant policy panels, the Public Works Subcommittee focuses on works-related matters. I note that members engage in discussions actively and pragmatically, reflecting the concerns and expectations of the local communities and the general public. During the four sessions of the 7th Legislative Council, the subcommittee collectively approved 121 public works project proposals with a total allocation amounting to $523.7 billion. The government continues to invest in infrastructure projects, striving to improve people's quality of life, drive Hong Kong economic development, and enhance our long-term competitiveness. However, the construction industry faces challenges such as high construction costs and labor shortage, while the public also expresses concern over the expenditure on public works projects. Given the current state of our economy and public finance, some members believe that the government should review and assess the projects in the pipeline, implement projects in an orderly manner according to their urgency and importance. The government should also stabilize the scale of investment in public works projects to prevent large fluctuation in project volume among different years. In the 2025 policy address, the chief executive mentioned that the government had originally planned an average annual expenditure of approximately $120 billion on capital works over the next 5 years, and proposed setting aside an additional $30 billion over the next 2 to 3 years. Members welcome the government's support for the local construction industry and its continued promotion of our economy. That concludes my report on the Public Works Subcommittee's work during this session. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my partner, Mr. Ben Chen, Deputy Chairman of the PWSC. We worked together to complete every task assigned to the subcommittee. Now I yield the floor to the Chairman of the FC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tony Che. I'll now provide a summary. During this session, the FC and the two subcommittees performed their functions properly in scrutinizing government funding proposals. The deliberation was rigorous, prudent, and efficient. Members approved funding proposals in a timely manner to support the government's efforts in implementing policies and measures that revive the economy. Looking back over the 4 years of the 7th Legislative Council, the FC approved a total of 261 financial proposals, with a total funding allocation of $697.2 billion. Many of these funding proposals have helped expand economic capacity, enhance competitiveness, and align ourselves with the national development strategies. The latest policy address has also put forward a series of economic policies and measures. I believe that the funding proposals reviewed by the FC in the future will continue to focus on promoting economic transformation. In recent years, Hong Kong has faced numerous challenges, particularly as international geopolitical developments have disrupted trade and investment markets. These challenges have tested not only the resilience of Hong Kong's economy, but also the administration's governance and fiscal management capabilities. They've also tested how the FC can prudently and properly approve funding while maintaining sound public finances, thereby creating value for society and the economy. I urge the next FC and its two subcommittees to continue their role as the gatekeeper. They should help safeguard public finances. They should move with the times, examine government's funding proposals with innovative thinking and fresh perspectives to help build a new paradigm for public finances and the economy. I also expect the SAR government to continue upholding the principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenue. The government should be frugal and prudent with its financial management, making the best use of its resources and allocate funds to where they are most needed. This will help safeguard people's livelihoods, enhance services, and truly benefit the public. Finally, as this term of LegCo is coming to a close, I'd like to thank Deputy Chairman Mr. Holden Chow for his advice on the FC's operation and for assisting me in chairing some of the meetings. I also thank Mr. Frankie Yik and Mr. Tony Che for leading the two subcommittees, as well as Mr. Ben Chen and Mr. Sunny Tan, the two deputy chairs, for assisting the FC in scrutinizing the funding proposals. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the legal advisor and other colleagues from the Secretariat for their professional support in handling the committee's heavy workload. Thank you. We'll now open the floor for questions. Those who'd like to ask questions, please raise their hands and identify the organizations they represent before they speak. I'm from Oriental Daily. I'd like to ask Mr. Chen. During FC meetings, you always remind members not to just ask questions about policy matters. Some of the questions were repeated. Do you think that at future FC meetings, would it be necessary to restrict what the members said in their questions? Thank you for your questions. I made the reminders, but I understand why members started their questions with those that concern policy matters. First, for some FC members, they are not members of the relevant panels. There are only 20 members to the panels, and there are 80 FC members. So a lot of the FC members did not take part in the panel discussions. That's why they asked about policy matters. Also, sometimes they would like to learn about a certain funding proposal from the perspectives of policy matters. That's why they would focus their questions about policies. Also, policy sometimes have to do with the government's financial arrangement, so it's hard for us to segregate policy matters from government's funding proposals. But I made the reminders because I'd like members to focus on the core functions of the FC. The core function of the FC is to comment on the funding proposal. So after the members have commented on the funding proposal or on the policy matters, they could focus on scrutinizing the financial arrangements. So I was usually quite lenient on how members asked their questions at the beginning, but after the first round, I would remind them to focus on the funding proposal, and I would sometimes remind them to follow up on the questions at panels. I still think that FC meetings have been very efficient. I personally don't think we need to revise the procedures or rules of procedures to restrict how members ask questions. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm from Now TV. Just now, you mentioned that we cannot gauge the work of the FC just by looking at the meeting time. But there has been criticism that the FC has scrutinized funding proposal within a very short period, and they wonder if the FC actually played the role as a gatekeeper. We're coming to close to this legislative session. How do you think the FC could improve to mend the public's perception? Also, Mr. Frankie Yik announced that he would not run for re-election. What is the reason behind, and did you talk to the central authorities about the decision? Perhaps I'll first address the first question, and I'll let Mr. Frankie Yik answer the second question. I've said time and again that when we look at whether the FC has scrutinized the funding proposal in a serious manner, we should not only look at the duration of the deliberation, we should look at the entire process. Perhaps I can share with you some figures to convince you. There were 44 funding proposals without FC's further discussion, and we spent a rather short time on approving these items. For these 44 items, 24 of them were public works projects, 20 of them were staffing proposals. At the subcommittee meeting, members spent 33 hours on these items. And these items were discussed at the Public Works Subcommittee and the Establishment Subcommittee. And members spent 49 hours on the subcommittee level. And at the FC, we spent 2 hours on these items. So in total, we spent some 80 hours on these 44 items. That means on average, we spent 2 hours on each of these items. So we spent quite a lot of time on these proposals. Apart from the panel, the 2 subcommittees, as well as the FC, members on different occasions have talked to members of the administration. And the time spent on these discussions is not included in those 80-some hours. We may spend 1, 2 hours, or 3, or even 4 hours on discussing each item. But let's not forget the time that was spent between members and the administration and the relevant government officials on the funding proposals outside the meeting. So we should not focus on the time spent during the FC meetings, because we cannot forget that time was spent between the government and members outside the meeting on these funding proposals. As to how we can let members of the public know, I think we members have the responsibility to tell the public what we have done on promoting a particular funding proposal. I hope that the new term LegCo members, whether they are at the FC, the ESC, or at the PWSC, if they have already talked to the government, I think they should let the public know so that the public is aware what has been improved in the funding proposal after the discussion. This will let the public have a better understanding of our work and the hard work that we put in behind the meeting. Yes, Mr. Yek. Well, if you have read my Facebook page, I have already told members of the public about my decision, so I have nothing to add. I joined the Legislative Council some years ago, and I have already trained up 2 members. And I am not sure if I have the chance to train up the 3rd member. Well, we do have the plan to pass on the torch. Any other questions?
First, the Finance Committee basically passed all public expenditure proposals in this term. Does this imply a lack of checks and balance? And should the LegCo be more rigorous in scrutinizing these proposals amid the government's fiscal deficits? And you also mentioned the government officials did not offer precise reply or unable to provide certain data sometimes. Does this stem from maybe a perception that it is guaranteed the Finance Committee will pass these public expenditure proposals? And secondly, regarding several senior lawmakers decided to step down, do you worry that this may impair the executive-legislative relationship as well as the quality of legislative scrutiny? And at last, some media suggested that you are one of the top candidates to take up the position as LegCo president. What's your comment on these reports? Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for your 3 questions. Regarding the first questions, you mentioned that FC basically approved all the financial proposals submitted by the government. But that doesn't mean we don't have any scrutinization behind, each proposal. As I mentioned, in Chinese, but I need to repeat it once again to you. Before any proposal submitted to the FC, no matter before ESC or even PWSC, they have to go through the panel meeting first. And usually the government official will, lobby all the members, no matter the panel members, the subcommittee members, or FC members regarding that funding proposal. Some of the time, the government will absorb some of the amendments or proposed amendment to the original, funding proposal, so as to make, all our members much more easier to accept, their, provisions about these specific projects. So I don't think, all the funding proposal being approved by FC, meaning we don't have scrutinization at all. So I would say, some of the lobbying and some of the analysis were done behind the door. is not, superficially when you ask just a few minutes questions, meaning you have, a different opinion on specific projects. So this is, my feeling about, why all the funding proposal being approved by FC during the current session. And I would not say the government say it's a guarantee that LegCo will approve all the proposals submitted by the government. What I mentioned was regarding the estimate of expenditure. We have 3,900 written questions from 88 members. And some of the questions are relating to very concrete areas and small areas. So I think it's pretty normal for some areas that the administration doesn't maintain detail, about those estimates. We have to think about a point is a balance between you have all the details on hand and you have substantial costs being invested in collecting those information. So I think currently we don't expect government could be able to provide all the details to us in one single go. But I think going forward and gradually when they regard it, the members need to have more details. Then they should deliberately collect more information in the future so as to answer our written question in a more precise manner. And that will be more persuasive in the sense that you illustrate the issues by numbers instead of just by words, right? Okay, the second question, I think this morning CE actually did answer your question very precisely. And from LegCo members' perspective, I would say, members of the public right now has higher and higher expectation on LegCo members. So we should, have concrete time commitment on whether we can discharge our duties. So you should notice that right now, different age levels, existing member express that they won't run for the new terms. The age level amounting from 30-something, 40-something, 60-something, and 70-something. So I won't, draw a line. Which one should be, consider not to run for the next term? I think every single members should have their concrete decision by themselves, no matter in terms of their family commitment, their career development, academic, pursuance, or whatever, right? And some of them, just like Frankie mentioned, they would like to pass the torch to newcomer or the next generation. So their decisions are quite diverse. And then I don't have any specific comment on that because I fully respect their own decision on whether to run for the next term or not. So the final questions, right now I still have to consult my constituency about whether to run for the new term or not. If I have my own decision, I will announce, to all of you at appropriate platform. But right now, I'm still not making any decision. And so your question is hypothetical in nature. I won't give you a concrete answer. Thank you.
Got it. Any other questions? Tan Yiyuan, I would like to ask if you would run for the next election, and there's rumors saying that you are the front runner for the next LegCo presidency. What's your thoughts on it? There's quite a number of members over 70 years old saying that they are not going to run for the next election. What's your views on that? Are you going to run for the next election? Thank you. Let me repeat my answer in Chinese again. The time for the remaining session is not long. I will focus on the work at hand. As a member from the functional constituency of finance, I will consult my constituency before I make my decision whether or not to run for the next election. I don't have my decision yet. I will announce it when time is right. As for the other questions, they are hypothetical question. The next LegCo president will be elected by the next LegCo term members. So we don't even know who the members of the next term of LegCo will be. So we for sure will not know who the president will be. Mr. Tony, Chair, please. I think that I have to look into various factors before I decide whether or not to run for the next election. First, my ability. Second, whether I have any support. Third, whether I'm still motivated, as well as my own wish. I thank you for your concern as to whether I will run for the eighth term of the Legislative Council. I think I will have to talk to the trade that I represent. I think that whoever representing the landscape surveying and architecture sector will keep in full communication with the sector. I'd like to hear from the constituency that I represent about their views. Thank you for your concern. I will announce my decision in due course. You may ask when the right time will be. Well, within next week. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm from Singtel. I have a question for Mr. Ronald Chan. According to some media reports, some members did not make any speeches during the FC in this legislative session. Do you think we will see an improvement in this regard in the next term? Also, there was a revision to the procedures in 2021. And how do you gauge the progress? And do you think there needs to be further revision? Thank you. Now, within this legislative term, only a very few number of members did not speak. A very few of them only. Now, of course, this is not desirable. But as I said, the public has higher and higher expectation on LegCo members, as well as on how we perform our duties. I think this has to do with self-discipline. Now, it is the personal decision of members on whether they decide to ask or not ask any questions. Some members told me that the first 5 questions raised at the FC meeting cover everything they wanted to know. This is quite common at the panel level. So a member may be ranked the 7th after they've pressed the button. And after the first 5 members have spoken, they told me that they would give up on their chance to speak. I think members' performance is subject to the surveillance of the public. I don't think there are any members who deliberately chose not to ask any questions. Perhaps you're not aware of this. I think there's some technique to how we should press the button, and I have actually taught members how to press the button so that they could be the first 5 members to speak. If you are one of the first 5 members who speak, you can avoid asking repetitive questions. If you press the button too slowly, your question may have already been asked by the time you speak. I, as the chairman of the FC, I allow questions to be repeated for 1 or 2 times, but if you keep repeating the questions and if they are meaningless, I would not allow them. This is my style of chairing the meeting. That's why I do not allow certain members to speak again if they ask repeated questions. For some members, they raise their hands and they just want to say that they support the funding proposal, and I would regard that as that member having spoken. So our statistics is based on whether the member has spoken. I don't think members have to ask any questions just for the sake of it. If they simply state that they support the funding proposal, we also count that as one round of speech. We rely on members to exercise self-discipline, to decide whether they have spoken on behalf of the public and whether they have helped safeguard public finances. So we want more members to speak, of course, but I don't think it is meaningful if the member asks the question just for the sake of it. I think what's important is that members ask constructive questions so that we can have a different perspectives on a particular funding proposal, and that after the government has taken on board the members' views, they could improve the proposal. Now, on the revision you mentioned, within this legislative session, there were 9 times where we proposed to invoke paragraph 3A of the FC procedures. And we voted against the decision 3 times. So it shows that this mechanism is effective. If PWSC and ESC does not recommend further discussion, and if you think that there is a need to have further discussion at the FC, then you could make such a request. And all FC members would vote on the request. That means members who made the request have to lobby other members and explain to other members why there needs to be a further discussion on a certain topic, because the government, for example, has not given a satisfactory answer. So for those who have successfully lobbied other members, they would be able to ensure that the funding proposal will see a further discussion at the FC meeting. And there were 6 times where we had a further discussion on a topic because of this. Some FC members, like 1 or 2 FC members, are particularly concerned about a certain topic, and they do not wish to waste everybody's time to have a further discussion on the topic, and that's why they voted against the request. So this mechanism has been effective and successful. This mechanism was introduced towards the end of the previous LegCo term. We can see whether this mechanism has been effective. From what we could see over the past 4 years, I think the mechanism has been effective. It has been able to fulfill its original purpose. I think we can keep running this mechanism for a while. If there are voices from members that this is not successful, and that we need to review this mechanism, then we'll have to rely on the wisdom of the new LegCo term members. Good afternoon, I'm from Cable TV. I'd like to ask Mr. Frankie Yik a question. You mentioned that you have decided not to run for re-election. Before you made the decision, did you get any instruction or were you pressured to make such a decision? Because there were rumors that members aged about 70 should not seek re-election. Also, apart from you, there are 2 other veteran members from your party will not seek re-election either. Are you worried that there will be fewer members from your party representing LegCo? Also, are you leaning towards running for re-election, Mr. Tony Che, and are you under any pressure that those who are aged 70 should not run for re-election? Yes, Mr. Frankie Yik. I think a number of members over the past few days have announced that they would not seek re-election, and they cover a couple of age groups. So I don't think your rumors actually stand. Also, as I said, since the first time I became a electoral member, I already made plan to step down. And as to whether a new members of our party will be able to run for the election, I think we'll have to see whether they get enough nominations from our party. Mr. Tony Che. Well, I've been electoral member for 3 terms, and I have different considerations at different times. Well, I saw some changes in my family over this current term. So as I said, I have different considerations at different times. I think you would face pressure no matter what kind of job you do. You may face pressure from your family, from our society, and from other sources. What is essential is how we can do away with the pressure. As to the point about members' age, I mentioned that I would consider 4 factors, and age has to do with your ability and capacity. In this regard, I actually voiced my opinions earlier. Is your age a deciding factor? Does that mean when you reach a certain age, you should not seek re-election? Well, I think age should not and is not my only consideration. I believe I've already answered your questions. Any further questions? I'm from the Economic Journal. Well, some members have not talked about whether they have made the decision to seek re-election or not. Can each of you tell us your decision? Well, I think we should focus on the operation of the FC today. But we had a consensus before the press conference that we will answer this question once. Yes, Mr. Sunny Tan.
好，大家好。咁
Good afternoon. I'm trying to complete the task for the remainder of the session. As for the next election, I will announce in due course. Holden. As to which members are to be sent by the TAB for the next election, I will have to wait for the decision of my party. What about you? Well, Holden has answered the question. Any other questions? If not, let's take another photo together.
好，望一望中間先，唔該。好，後面攝影師有冇需要？好。好，望一望中間啊，再。好 ，OK 未？好，咁今日記者會嚟到呢度結束。
That's the end of the press conference. Thank you.